The more disciplined you become with money, the less secure you feel. And if that sentence irritated you a little, it's probably because it's true. That's not a theory. That's the experience of a specific kind of person. Careful, informed, responsible, who does everything right and still can't shake the hum. You are not chasing wealth. You are chasing relief. And the harder you chase it, the further it moves. You saved more this year than last year, maybe significantly more. And yet, somewhere underneath that, there is a quiet, persistent feeling that it's still not quite enough. Not panic, not crisis, just a low hum, a background tension that never fully clears, no matter what the number says. You check the balance, you feel okay for a moment, then okay fades, and the hum comes back. Here's what makes this worth paying attention to. You're not being reckless. You're not avoiding anything. You are actively, deliberately building security. And the more seriously you take that, the louder the hum gets. That is not a coincidence. Let's be clear about who watches a video like this. You are not someone who avoids financial reality. You don't bury your head. You think about money seriously, sometimes more than you'd like to. You track things. You plan. You make trade-offs that people around you probably don't consider. You read. You pay attention. When something in your financial life feels off, you try to understand it rather than hope it resolves on its own. And by most measurable standards, you are doing well. Or at least well enough that the anxiety you carry doesn't seem to make logical sense. You know this. You've probably told yourself this. I make good money. I'm saving. What is wrong with me? Nothing is wrong with you. What's happening is far more specific than that, and far more understandable than that framing allows. The people most affected by what we're going to examine today are not the ones who are careless with money. They're the ones who care deeply, who have internalized responsibility, who chose delayed gratification, sometimes at real personal cost, because they believed it would eventually produce a feeling of stability. That's you. And I'm not saying that to be kind. I'm saying it because it matters. Because the trap we're going to name today doesn't catch people who don't try. It catches the ones who try hardest. It gets stronger the more disciplined you become. And it almost never gets identified because from the outside, it looks exactly like virtue.
Here is what no one tells you when you commit to saving seriously. Consistent, deliberate saving does not automatically produce a feeling of security. For many people, it produces the opposite. The more you save, the more aware you become of what you haven't saved. The number grows, and so does the distance between where you are and where your mind has decided you need to be. This is the betrayal. You did the right thing. You delayed, you sacrificed, you chose the responsible path, and instead of the calm that was supposed to follow, you got a moving target. Call it what it is, the invisible target. The point you're building toward that quietly relocates every time you get close. You don't have a savings problem, you have a target that refuses to let you win. When you had $10,000, enough felt like $50,000. When you hit $50,000, enough became $150,000. When you reached that, there was a new reason, inflation, uncertainty, a projection you ran that moved the line again. Each shift felt justified, each one made sense in the moment, but the feeling of enough never arrived, not because you hadn't saved enough, but because the mechanism that was supposed to produce that feeling had been quietly disconnected from the number in your account. You have been walking toward a destination that moves, and the discipline required to keep walking. That discipline is real and it is yours, but it is also feeding the very system that keeps the destination out of reach. This is not a moral failure. It is what happens when a deeply human psychological process collides with a genuinely responsible financial behavior. and it gets more powerful, not less, as your income and savings rate increase. There's one mechanism at the center of this, one process that explains why more saving can produce more anxiety instead of less. It's called hedonic adaptation, but forget the label. What matters is what it actually does. Your brain has a baseline, a set point, a level of whatever it considers normal, and it is extraordinarily good at recalibrating that baseline to match your current reality. This is useful in many areas of life. It's why grief eventually softens, why joy doesn't stay at peak intensity. The brain normalizes, it resets. But when this same mechanism meets financial saving, something quietly corrosive happens. When your balance grows, your brain does not interpret that as we have more than we need. It interprets it as this is the new normal. The higher number becomes the floor, and anything below it starts to feel like loss, even if it's a number you once considered a milestone. So you hit the goal, the brain resets. Now that goal is simply the baseline, and the unease returns at exactly the same volume it had before. Here is the line worth sitting with. You think you are building safety. You are building a higher threshold for feeling safe. That is the invisible target in mechanical terms. The goal isn't moving because your circumstances keep changing. It's moving because the brain's definition of normal keeps updating to match what you've already achieved. But it goes further, because saving isn't only a number, it's a behavior. And the behavior itself sends a message to your nervous system. Every time you save, every time you restrain a purchase, contribute to an account, set something aside, you are rehearsing at a low level a premise. That premise, roughly, is the future is uncertain and I need to protect myself. Do that once, it's rational planning. Do it as a sustained practice over years, and your nervous system begins to internalize the assumption, not just the action. The belief that security is fragile, that the ground is not fully stable. Saving becomes the ritual that keeps the fear contained, which means the fear is never resolved. It's managed temporarily until the next time you check the balance, run a projection, or read something unsettling about the economy. The thought, I don't have enough yet. The emotion, quiet vigilance, low-grade unease. The behavior, save more, spend less, check the numbers. And then the thought returns, because the behavior confirmed the premise. This is the loop, running quietly, under the surface, inside an otherwise functional and responsible financial life, which is precisely why it's so hard to see. You never feel reckless, you feel careful, prudent, like you're doing the right thing. And you are, but the invisible target is still moving.
This doesn't show up as dramatic behavior. It shows up in the small, ordinary moments of a regular week. You're on a work trip. The hotel is comfortable, nothing extravagant. There's a decent restaurant in the building. You've had a long day, but you sit with the menu open and run a quick calculation in your head, not because you can't afford it. You absolutely can. But there's a small resistance, a slight internal friction, and you order the cheaper thing. You don't enjoy it as much as you would have enjoyed the other thing. You tell yourself it doesn't matter. There's a quiet, barely nameable sense of deprivation that lasts about 15 minutes. Then it passes, and you forget about it. Until the next time. You get a raise, a real one, and for 2, maybe 3 days, you feel genuinely good. Then your brain starts calculating. If I redirect this entirely, savings, investments, the mortgage, I could reach the next target faster. And you do that, and the raise disappears into accounts you don't touch, and your daily life doesn't change. And 6 months later, you'd have to stop and think to even remember that the raise happened. You and your partner talk about a trip, a real one, not a long weekend, but somewhere you've both wanted to go for years. The conversation starts with excitement.
Then, gradually, it becomes a negotiation with an invisible third party. The future. Is this the right time? Should we wait until things feel more settled? And more settled doesn't mean anything specific. It's just a feeling. The trip gets vague, then postponed, then something else comes up. And 3 years pass, and you call that maturity. But sometimes it's just fear wearing a responsible mask. Here, stop for just a moment. Think about the last time money felt simple. Not exciting, not like a win, just uncomplicated, present. If you're having trouble locating a specific memory, that is not a small thing. A friend mentions casually that they bought something, a weekend away, a piece of furniture, something comfortable and reasonably priced, and they just bought it. No extended deliberation, no internal audit. They wanted it, it was within reach, they got it. And you feel something in response to that. Maybe mild judgment, maybe something closer to envy, not of the thing, but of the ease, the absence of negotiation, the fact that they just did it without the weight you carry into every decision like that. None of these are extreme. They are the texture of daily life for someone running this loop. And the detail that matters is, in none of these moments are you doing anything wrong. You are being careful, responsible. But the cost is showing up somewhere else, and it's not on a spreadsheet. The long-term cost of this pattern is not financial ruin. That's not what happens. The accounts stay healthy, the savings rate stays strong. By conventional measures, you're on track. The cost is something harder to quantify and easier to ignore. It is the slow accumulation of a life that was perpetually deferred, not dramatically, not "I abandoned my dreams," more quietly. The experiences that kept almost happening but didn't. The version of yourself who was going to feel more relaxed once things were more settled. The ease that was always 18 months away. And the thing about deferred ease is that it becomes a habit of mind. After enough years of telling yourself that comfort is something you'll fully step into later, your nervous system stops believing in later. It stops feeling like a real destination. It starts to feel like a story you tell yourself to keep moving. And so the pattern continues, not because you've decided it should, because it has become the only mode you know. This shows up clearly in retirement, which is one of the few places where the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Some people who have saved carefully for decades find that when the moment finally arrives, they cannot spend, they cannot use what they built. The permission they were waiting for never came from the number, and they realize with something close to grief that they were waiting for a feeling that the number was never designed to deliver. Some people retire financially secure and emotionally unable to use what they built. But you don't have to wait until retirement to feel this. You can feel it on a Tuesday evening, in whether you can be present on a Saturday afternoon without running numbers in your head, in whether "enough for now" is a phrase your nervous system recognizes as real. The compounding here is not financial, it's psychological. Each year you defer ease, the deferral becomes more natural, more automatic, more invisible. The invisible target gets harder to see precisely because it's been there so long. And the anxiety doesn't decrease with time, not on its own. It quiets during stable periods. It sharpens when anything shifts, a job change, a market dip, a conversation. And the louder it gets, the loop tightens. This is the quiet cost, not catastrophic, just a persistent low-grade narrowing of the life you were building all this for. Sit with some of these for a moment. Not to answer out loud, just to notice what comes up. When your balance is higher than it's ever been, do you feel secure? Or do you feel the distance between where you are and the next number? Is there a version of your financial situation that you can genuinely imagine feeling at ease in? And if so, what's actually different about it? Or does it just feel like more? Think about the last time you spent money on something purely for present enjoyment. Not an investment, not a necessity, something for now. How long ago was that? And how did it feel? When you picture the future version of yourself who finally has enough, what does that person have that you don't have now? Is it a number, or is it a feeling? And if it's a feeling, what evidence do you have that the number will produce it? Is your financial caution keeping you safe or keeping you from something? And in your daily life right now, is there a meaningful difference between those two things? These are not rhetorical. They're not designed to have clean answers. They're designed to locate something, a gap between what you're building and what you're actually living. If something here lands with a quiet discomfort, not offense, just recognition, that discomfort is information. You don't have to act on it, but it's worth noticing it's there.
Here's what changes when you can see this pattern clearly. Not fix it, just see it. The loop doesn't stop, but it loses a layer of its power. When the unease arrives, that familiar hum after you check the balance, and you can name it, not "I'm worried about money," but something more specific. The invisible target just moved. My brain reset the baseline. This feeling isn't a signal about my circumstances. This is the pattern running. That naming creates distance, not between you and your finances, but between you and the automatic interpretation your brain has been running without interference. You are not the loop. You are the person who can observe the loop, and that distinction, which sounds subtle, is one of the more consequential things a person can develop around money. Because most financial behavior is not driven by logic, it's driven by this layer of automatic interpretation, the thought that arrives before the thought, the feeling that precedes the decision. When that layer is invisible, it runs without interference. It shapes what feels like rational, careful planning, but it is not neutral. It is a system, and systems, once named, can be watched. This is not about learning to be careless. It's not about dismissing real risk. It is about developing the capacity to distinguish between a genuine financial signal and a pattern that is running because it has always run. Right now, for many of you, those two things feel identical. The unease feels like information, like it's pointing to something real that needs to be fixed, and sometimes it is. But sometimes it is the invisible target, generating a familiar feeling on schedule, independent of your actual circumstances. The difference matters, and you can learn to notice it. Not fix it, notice it.
You were never broken. You were just measuring the wrong thing. It was expecting discipline to produce a feeling it was never designed to produce. You built the habit. You did the work, you held the line when it was uncomfortable. That is all real and it is all yours. But the ease you were saving toward, that was never stored in the account. It was never going to be released when the number hit the target, because the target was always going to move. That's not a flaw in your plan. That's the invisible target doing exactly what it does. And now that you can see it, even slightly more clearly than you could an hour ago, something has shifted, not in your finances, in your ability to watch what's actually happening. That's where this begins. If something in this landed, not what you're going to do, just what you recognized. Leave it in the comments. That's enough.